Welcome back to another edition of the Friday Show, brought to you by Uptowncharlybrown stud, whose, wait for it, recently won 3 Iroquois Awards, Champion Older Male, PA Preferred Male, and the Leading Breeding Fund recipient. Uptowncharlybrown stud owns, wait for it, and he's by Uptowncharlybrown. Very pleased to be joined by our editor-in-chief, Natalie Voss, this week. Natalie, it's only been 3 weeks since the Kentucky Derby, I think, right? Or no, it's 4 weeks. But
or 6 weeks.
Longer.
Or
it seems a little longer than that.
It feels like it was a good 6 months ago, and we still have the Belmont left to go. So I have no understanding of time anymore.
Yeah, it's been, the headlines just kind of keep coming. And something else that keeps coming are emails to us in the form of questions about all the stuff that's going on, starting with Bob Baffert and moving on to other subjects. People are very curious about why we do some things, why we don't do some things. So I've got a few questions to ask you. Is that okay?
Okay.
All right. Number one, why haven't you reported more on the status of the split sample from Medina Spirit's Kentucky Derby test?
Well, so, I mean, we did sort of do an explainer looking at the split sample testing process, but we can't really know that much more about what's currently going on with the sample. Kentucky Horse Racing Commission is not allowed to really even officially acknowledge a positive test, let alone comment on it until the split comes back. So they can't say anything much about what's going on. And the only other people who would sort of know what was happening would be Bob Baffert and his crew. And he and his attorney have gone radio silent since about the Preakness. So we don't have much more we can give you until the word gets to be official, which is often true in drug testing cases. Most of the time, we don't know that there's an initial positive test and a split sample out there kind of waiting. But in the rare case that we do, we're sort of stuck waiting with everybody else, and we don't have a lot more control over it than that.
Yeah, the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission has to do everything by the book. Otherwise, they're giving probably some ammunition to Bob Baffert and his attorney in the event of an appeal or a civil litigation down the road. So they can't comment. And we've seen this happen before. There was a case a number of years ago at the Breeders' Cup where there were rumors and sourced information that said there was a positive test for a filly named Wait a While from Todd Pletcher's barn. The California Horse Racing Board, where the Breeders' Cup was that year, couldn't say anything. They even though we had specific information, they could not comment on it. Pletcher did not want to comment on it. So that never got reported until an actual suspension or a ruling came out on it. So I don't know. This is going to take a while. And that's another question we get is, why does the split sample process take so long?
Well, so as I learned from talking to Dr. Mary Scalay at the RMTC last week, I think it was last week, it's usually kind of in best case scenario, you're looking at somewhere between 4 to 8 weeks. And that's because, first of all, they have to notify the trainer that there is a positive, see if they want to do a split. And then they have to ask the various accredited labs who are available, like who is around that could do this split sample test and how long would it take them. And there's not, there is a finite number of labs in this country that do horse race testing. There's a finite number who are RMTC accredited. And for them, their priority is really their contract work, which is their day in, day out testing of post-race samples out of competition samples. It's difficult for them with the infrastructure and the employee levels that they have oftentimes to make room for this extra test that they have to do. It doesn't actually take any longer than the initial post-race test, is what I learned from Dr. Scalay. I always thought the actual testing process itself was longer. It's more about figuring out how to get it in the queue. And this doesn't apply in the Baffert case, but in cases where you have a more unusual drug, you would also be concerned about making sure you got it to a lab that had the same level of sensitivity testing for that particular substance. If it was something strange, you might be stuck with even fewer choices. So, she had told me, Dr. Scalay had told me when she was the medical director at the Kentucky Racing Commission, she would query all of the accredited labs, and it was she didn't remember it ever happening that all of them came back and said, oh yeah, I'm available to do the split sample test. So she would try to give the trainer two choices. If that was sort of like her goal, to have at least two options so that they had a decision to make. It also might be complicating the situation that Baffert released this information publicly, because if I were a lab director and I was aware that I was getting the Derby split sample, I would probably be thinking about how in the Arkansas case, Baffert's attorney really made an effort to question the procedures of the testing lab in that situation. I'd be a little bit nervous about taking this on if I knew whose sample it was.
One thing that I've learned over the years is that when they do send a split sample, it's not sent blindly. The lab is told to look, what to look for. And so it's not like they just do a blind test on it. They are looking for a specific substance. And some people say that's not fair, that you should just send it and see if the lab comes up with the same thing without being guided as far as what it is.
Right. And actually, what Dr. Scalay told me is that it's important for the split sample testing lab to know what concentration the substance was found in, so that they can kind of adjust their equipment to make sure they're looking at the appropriate range of concentrations. Like if they would normally test a sample for somewhere between 0 and 200 picograms, and the thing that the first lab found is only at 20, well, you're going to get a less specific result if you kind of have your measurements set out that wide. So if you can narrow them to where you think this might fall and then see whether or not it's the same, you have a better chance of being as specific as possible. So that's part of the reason that they tell them what they're looking for and what the previous concentration was.
So another question that we get is there have been rumors about a certain trainer, and I'm not saying anything about it. Just we get emails like that all the time, and from all over the country, and they say, "Why haven't you reported on it?" What? I know it seems kind of silly to ask that question, but some people actually think that we can just report on rumors without doing any fact checking and substantiation.
Well, I think my favorite ones of those emails are where they make reference to a trainer without naming them, and then ask me why I'm not reporting on them. And very often I have to say, I don't know what you're talking about. So how could I have reported on them? But even when somebody gives us a name, we need more to go on than just, I really think this guy is doing something wrong. Look at his win percentage. Look at him improving such and such a horse. Yeah, those are interesting pieces of information that certainly would make me suspicious of somebody, but I can't write a story without getting sued saying, oh, so-and-so is clearly doping horses, when I have absolutely nothing else to go on. In order for us to make a story like that work, we have to know what someone's using, how they're using it, how they're acquiring it. We have to be really specific. And if it's something that's not showing up in post-race tests, you have to be that much more specific, because you don't have that as your sort of third-party verification. So it's very difficult to make stories like that stick. And that doesn't mean that we don't want to. It's just the practicality of it is you have to have so much information that only a very few people very close to the situation would even know.
Yeah. I mean, just like people deserve due process once they're charged with something, we can't just blindly name somebody saying, yeah, we think that guy's cheating because he wins too many races. I mean, it's just not the way it works.
Well, and I will say, somebody has sent me an email about just about every licensed trainer you've ever heard of and never heard of saying, oh, I'm so sure this guy is cheating. And I don't think that 100% of them are always on the mark either, which is exactly why you need that verification.
Yeah. Let's move to Texas. Not physically, but let's talk a little bit about what we learned this week about the big futurity on Friday night, where they did hair testing, and 6 of the 10 horses in the finalists of this rich Sam Houston futurity tested positive in hair testing for either clenbuterol or albuterol, both of which are bronchodilators that we know are abused for their steroidal effects in horses, especially quarter horses. It seems to be a real problem. Texas has completely banned both drugs, so any level of detection is considered a violation. The hair testing, did something that maybe the plasma and urine test couldn't do, which was find these drugs. Why doesn't every state use hair testing? Wouldn't that be the answer to all the problems in racing?
Right. So we actually did a story about that also in the last couple of weeks. And what I learned was that, hair testing is really good for banned substances like the clenbuterol and albuterol, in this case, where the horse is not ever supposed to have had it. Because it's good at sort of finding yes or no, something is there. It's not really that good at this point in the technology at telling you how much of something was given. You can get a little bit of an idea about that, but not very specific, or exactly when it was given. There are sort of various methods for testing hair. There's various collection processes for taking hair from the horse in order to test it. And that means that you can have more than one lab test the same sample in different ways and come up with slightly different results, or sometimes very different results, which is why regulators are not really interested in using that to test for something where there is some tolerance for it being in the horse, like a therapeutic, because it wouldn't give you enough information. You also have to wait some length of time for the hair to grow out enough to be able to see the drug in the hair. And depending on how you collect it, that would change the amount of time post-administration before you'd see it in the hair. It depends on how much of the hair you're getting, whether you're clipping it or pulling it or cutting it. So it's just not consistent enough at this point for those purposes. But what drug testing authorities did tell me was it's good for intelligence purposes and for as well as banned substances, sort of looking to see what do we think people are doing, just so that we can begin monitoring for that better.
I know that Oaklawn Park in Arkansas started doing hair testing this year, but they couldn't do anything with it. Actually, I'm not sure if it was Oaklawn or the Arkansas Racing Commission, but there was nothing they could do with it, and in part because if you hair test a claiming horse that maybe changed barns from, was claimed a month earlier, if the previous trainer was doing something to the horse that he shouldn't have, it's going to come up in hair testing, but it's very unlikely they'll be able to tell which trainer did it, which trainer's vet did it. And therefore, I'm assuming that what they're doing is intelligence gathering at Oaklawn Park.
Yeah, I would hope so. It is useful for that, but it sounds to me like it's a long way off before that's going to become standard. The testing processes, I should say, for urine and blood are not as different between labs as it is for hair. So we don't have that problem normally, but when you're doing hair testing, the inconsistency does come into play. Just it's not far enough along yet.
All right, well, here's the final question. This is one we get all the time, and we've gotten it a few times in the last couple of weeks. Why do you only report negative news?
Oh, this question. So I have a lot of problems with the premise of this question. I should say, first of all, I don't personally really think that news is negative or positive. I think it is just true as long as it is true, as long as it's been well reported. So I sort of resent the premise of the question to begin with when I get it. But I think what people mean is, why are you talking about or bringing up things that don't make the industry look good? And, first of all, we're a journalistic outlet. We're not public relations. It's not our job to make the industry look good exactly. It is our job to report the news. And first of all, like, not reporting on something that doesn't look so great, like a medication positive, will not change the fact that medication positive has happened. Mm-hmm. But also importantly, we want to see the sport improve itself. And we don't think that ignoring things that are difficult to deal with or that are ugly is going to make that happen. We think that, reporting things in a balanced way is the best way to try to fix the problems as well as hold up the good things that are happening.
Yeah, I usually respond to those questions with, and they don't report on the airlines or the airplanes that don't crash or the banks that weren't robbed. And we also do plenty of good news. We're the website that had a thing for a while called Good News Friday until for years. Yeah. And we actually tried to get additional sponsorship for it, and nobody wanted to sponsor it. So, well, what does that tell you, right?
Yeah. And I'm happy to refer anybody to our pages and pages and pages of good news when they ask, because it is out there. And even though people are not as excited about that or sharing that as frequently, we're still going to do that because, balance is the goal.
Yeah. Check out the story this week on Alex Campbell, the owner of Mean Mary that won Preakness Day, and his incredible story and all he does for the community. Check out the story that Tom Padula wrote about Wesley Ward's team, that gets his horses ready for Ascot. There's plenty of good news out there in the Pollock Report. So just look for it. Don't just look for the bad headlines. All right. I'm talking to you, the person that sent that question. Well, Natalie, thanks a lot for joining us this week. Appreciate it. Appreciate all you do, the investigative work and the good news story. You've told me from time to time, I got to write some good news because some of this stuff is getting to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we had a series on barn cats for a while. I have to say I missed that series this week more than ever.
Maybe we should bring it back.
I think we should.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much, and we'll be right back.
And they're off.
This episode of The Friday Show is brought to you by Uptowncharlybrown Stud, America's #1 affordable racing partnership. Thought you couldn't afford it? Think again. For just $1,000, you can buy a 1% interest in a promising 2-year-old in the lucrative Pennsylvania program where the sky's the limit. So what are you waiting for? Check us out on the web at utcbstud.com or call 732-766-4507 today. Uptown Charlie Brown Stud.
Thank you to Uptowncharlybrown Stud for their sponsorship of The Friday Show. And I'm pleased to be joined by Joe Nevills, Bloodstock Editor of the Pollock Report. We are here to discuss the Star of the Week.
The three of them take their battle to the quarter pole. Sconson is not far behind, and she switched outside fourth. Headland fifth, top of the stretch. Rising Seas still in front. Frank's Rocket trying to get by. Sconson bursts on the scene. Here comes Sconson now, fourth, and now third, and now second. And Sconson rocketing by the pacemakers. Sconson in front. Rising Seas back into second. Frank's Rocket is third. Headland and Tipsy Gal. Sconson scores. Under the wire, the 3-length winner. Rising Seas was second. Frank's Rocket was third. And Headland a tough luck fourth.
I like this horse, Joe. Sconson, named for the state just to the north of where I grew up. I grew up about 2 miles from the state line near Beloit, Wisconsin, and about an hour from Madison, Wisconsin. This horse is owned and bred by Lloyd Madison Farms. I guess the co-owners are from Madison. It's where I used to go when we'd cut class in high school. We'd go up to University of Wisconsin, hang out, and have fun.
Yeah, and it goes back even further than that. Lloyd Madison Farms, the owner and breeder of Sconson, also raced the dam Scotty, who raced for Lloyd Madison as a Tisnow mare. So clearly the Wisconsin name runs deep with these guys. The Lloyd Madison partnership, like you said, named after Madison, Wisconsin. 3 guys from Madison, Wisconsin. And it's good. It's good to see from a non-traditional racing state people make an impact on the national scene.
And you're an upper Midwest guy yourself, right?
Exactly. Yes. I'm separated from Wisconsin by Lake Michigan. I've never actually been to Wisconsin before, but we did have a few Wisconsin-bred Arabians run at Mount Pleasant Meadows. So it was always interesting to hear their travels of going over the Mackinac Bridge and coming to central Michigan.
Yeah, this is a nice horse. As a 3-year-old last year, she won the eight bells at Churchill Downs. She loves Churchill Downs. And, what I like about this, too, is Greg Foley doesn't get a lot of opportunities. These have been good clients of his. And like a lot of trainers, you give a good horseman a good horse, he's going to get results. You don't have to go into those 300 horse stables all the time to get results. And I'm really glad for Greg Foley to see this happen.
Exactly. And a big win for Sconson sire, Include, as well. Include seems to keep getting nice runners and, really flies under the radar. And every once in a while, he gets one that really jumps up and gets you.
All right, well, that's our Star of the Week for this week. Joe, thanks for joining us. Thanks to Uptowncharlybrown Stud for their sponsorship of the Friday Show. And we will see you next week